So this video will talk about Einstein, but not from the perspective of the science, not going deep into the physics or the theories that Einstein developed, as much as from the perspective of creativity, great work, and a number of cultural dimensions that relate to Einstein, Einstein's image, and Einstein's work. There is something special about Einstein. What is that? What is special about Einstein? You might rush and say, he's the smartest human being to ever live. But we will see, and I'll talk about that later. This isn't it. It's not about his extraordinary intelligence. Well, it's not completely about extraordinary intelligence. There are many intelligent people, even maybe smarter than Einstein. There is something else. Einstein is a great scientist who used imagination a lot. He had a very strong and influential position that far exceeded his field. He had a cultural impact for a number of reasons that we can look at. He had an iconic personality that was very memorable. He was involved with a number of humanitarian causes. He had strong ethical positions on a number of issues. So he had this revolutionary set of traits. In his work, he always tended to be philosophical. He bridged a number of different disciplines and connected the philosophical with the physics, with the science, and had a contemplative position towards things. All of this, in addition to him being a special kind of a conceptual, very intuitive, big picture thinker who reimagined some of the fundamental laws of physics, all contributed to making Einstein special. But there are also a number of other elements, a number of other factors that made Einstein the icon that he is. Einstein was a very quirky, strange genius. Okay, he had an interesting personality which was media friendly, and he could have become the icon that we know today, partly because of this, partly because of the political conditions that surrounded Einstein's work, his movement from Germany to the United States, his involvement with a number of projects, with a number of colleagues, his letter to Roosevelt, his activism, so to speak. And so he became an icon. Now, when he became an icon, this accentuated all the other dimensions of his personality, including his intelligence, his work in physics, and so on. And I say this because at the same period that Einstein lived and worked, there were a number of amazing physicists who also created breakthroughs that reshaped, reimagined our very conception of reality. You might have seen some videos or some material or some content that basically argues or says that Einstein has this extraordinary brain and it's bigger than the regular human brain. There were some funny exaggerations, but we can't really say at that level of intelligence that Einstein is much smarter than everybody else. It doesn't work. IQ doesn't work like that. So we can't say Einstein is smarter than Schrodinger, Planck, or even Niels Bohr. And knowing that these two had a number of disagreements, and Einstein turned out to be on the wrong side of that, experimentally, so far at least. So we will explore all this. The next three sections will talk about Einstein's childhood, about the role of imagination in his work next, and finally about Einstein's attitude towards work, and then we'll reflect on all this. So we'll talk a little bit about Einstein's childhood, which is a very interesting, important component of his overall story. So first, Einstein was a late bloomer. Einstein took him a while to talk. He was 3 or 4 years old when he could talk. And even then, he would talk deliberately and slowly, very slowly. Members of his family used to call him dopey, and some even used to wonder whether he had some kind of learning disability. Now, that being said, we can wonder whether this delay in the development of his verbal intelligence skills actually had other positive effects, right? I frequently wrestle with this idea about children who are late to talk, late to speak. What are they doing in this period? So is the delay in verbal intelligence compensated for by developments in other kinds of intelligence? Maybe a more conceptual way. Maybe they are thinking more, talking less, communicating less, reflecting more, maybe. And does the weakness in the verbal, in saying less words, does this thing mean that there is more visualization happening? So could this delay in talking be one of the justifications for Einstein's unique ability to reason and visualize and imagine things? Another aspect of his childhood is related to education. And Einstein faced a number of difficulties with the rigid rote learning education style that was prevalent in Germany at the time. He had difficulties and he had an animosity towards the system somehow. And there is an interesting story of one teacher of his predicting unsuccessfully that he told Einstein, "You will never amount to much," and that was not a very accurate prediction to say. And here we can ask and say, well, Einstein moved to Switzerland at around the age of 15, and he found learning there better, easier. And we can ask, did this save him intellectually? There are a couple of interesting childhood events, sweet childhood stories that have some meaning, and I'll tell them quickly. One, when Einstein was 5 years old, his father gave him a compass, and this was mesmerizing for Einstein, right? How the needle moved mysteriously, always pointing north. It was very interesting to him, and it sparked a lifelong curiosity. What is moving it? What are the laws governing this? Why is this happening? And he later reflected on how this experience made a lasting impression on him, and how this experience told him that there had to be something behind things, arousing in him this sense of curiosity and wonder. The other story here is when he was 12, he discovered a geometry book, and he calls this my sacred geometry book. And he studied this book obsessively. He taught himself advanced math, being years ahead of his peers. And this is just another example of his passion and his ability, his curiosity, his ability to pursue independent, subjective, intellectual interests. These stories are very interesting because this frequently happens in childhood. We talk about this when we talk about critical events. Sometimes there are these unique events or unique objects in childhood that have a disproportionate impact on the whole trajectory of someone's life. And this happened obviously with Einstein. A final thought here related to Einstein's beliefs about childhood and the importance of imagination is his quote and his recommendation that the best way to develop children when they're young is to tell them a lot of fairy tales, right? And because this has a role in developing their imaginations, which will be the discussion of the coming section. So before discussing the power of imagination in Einstein's story in detail, let's say that Einstein used to love his violin. He played the violin a lot. He loved music, and he said once that if he wasn't a mathematician, he would probably been a musician. He even calls himself an artist sometime. And this links to our discussion here of imagination and the role it played in Einstein's work. So, the first aspect of this amazing imagination is the thought experiments that Einstein had. So, even when he was a teenager, probably 16 years old, he says that he used to imagine himself traveling with a ray of light. And this thought experiment, if you imagine yourself traveling with a ray of light, is one of the reasons that led to the development of the special theory of relativity. He had another thought experiment, which is imagining himself in a falling elevator, and this kind of led to the development of the equivalence effect in the general theory of relativity as well. He imagined light in new ways, and he thought about light as particles instead of waves, and this led to the discovery of the photoelectric effect. So all of these thought experiments are acts of imagination, right? Subjective acts of imagination in somebody's mind that led to the development of these amazing theories that changed our understanding of reality. This imagination allowed Einstein to reimagine the universe, right? His ideas were revolutionary in more than one dimension, right? He reimagined light and how light works, and his formulas kind of established time as relative, the speed of light as absolute, right? And so this was an interesting change in the conception of these variables. The curvature of space-time and reimagining how gravity, mass, and space-time interact, fundamentally changing how we view the very fabric of reality and the fabric of nature. These were very deep and fundamental changes to our understanding of the world that Einstein brought forth. Einstein prioritized visualization over calculation, so he would frequently imagine and visualize things till the theory became clear, and he would leave the calculation to the end. And this is why his quote on the importance of imagination as opposed to knowledge fits, right? Because imagination can encircle the universe. Now, the interesting thing on the flip side of all this, where his imagination kind of failed him, I don't know, we say that with retrospect, but it was at the point where he met uncertainty, where physics met the fundamental uncertainty of reality. Because he famously said, God does not play dice with the universe. And this is when quantum mechanics started showing how much uncertainty there is in reality, the probabilistic nature of the universe, and his conception of light as a particle seemed to have been too deterministic, right? And there are interesting discussions or clashes between him and Niels Bohr on this. He just couldn't let go of the deterministic image of the universe. There are a number of very entertaining stories if you're into that here. But and this is something I argue in Fuzzy on the dark side. We have to accept the fundamental, inherent, and inescapable uncertainty that is everywhere. And this is either because reality itself is made to be uncertain, at least this is how we can see it so far, or because our intelligence, our ability to understand reality will always be limited. Something interesting to mention here is his unified field theory. Einstein kept working on that, but it did not reach any satisfactory conclusion. And perhaps this is another example of the failure of determinism and the triumph of uncertainty, at least so far in our conception of the world. Work is life. And this is definitely important in the Einstein story. Work is life because you have to love your work, you have to live your work to do great work. Einstein talks about the power of passionate curiosity, and he says it's not that I'm more intelligent, it's just that I stay with problems more. Like, when do we stay with problems more? When we are passionate about them, when we intrinsically want to solve these problems, when we have a passion for what we're doing, when we believe that what we are doing is actually us, we start identifying with. And this was definitely the case with Einstein. Once you identify with your work, you can easily let go of other things in order to build this great achievement. In order to do that, we must use routines and we must have structure. And Einstein definitely had this. And this is about the power of habits and about the power of the mundane. Now, interestingly, this had a quirky component in this case because Einstein frequently was absent-minded, right? He didn't bother himself with memorizing a lot of details, home addresses, numbers, etc. And he didn't even bother with wearing socks or wearing different clothes. And this is an interesting example that's kind of similar to aspects of the Steve Jobs story. Why waste time on wearing different clothes every day or wearing socks, so to speak? So this integration of work into daily life, work becoming life, work being infused with passion, with curiosity. Another aspect here is solitude and inspiration. And it seemed that Einstein believed that breakthroughs come subjectively from individuals. And this has to be linked to solitude. You need time alone, you need time to reflect, you need to be able to individually, subjectively look at the problem for prolonged periods of time, as he mentioned, to be able to solve them. Playful problem solving. So Einstein famously said that creativity is intelligence having fun. And in order for you to be able to solve difficult problems, you have to be enjoying that. And there has to be an element in play, and this is evident in his equation, right, about work and play. Good work has to be perceived as play in a sense. So we see all of these elements: passionate curiosity, the structure of routines and habits, solitude and inspiration, and playful problem solving. They are all components of great work, as we've discussed them frequently in the Atlas of Worldly Wisdom. And I think here it's very interesting to say that Einstein exemplifies the AIC triple helix with his work, with excellence in each of the spirals, right? In the awareness, the knowledge spiral, his knowledge was at the edge of his field and extended into other disciplines. In the intent spiral, and this is shown by his powers of imagination and the sheer abilities of his creativity, creative intellect, and finally creativeness, his execution skills, his ability to design his life, to design his habits, his work environment, in order to produce all this great work that he delivered. The story of Einstein's brain did not stop when he died. So there was interesting drama around this. A few hours after his death, there was a doctor who was performing the autopsy, and he took the brain, and the brain was subject to a number of experiments. He took photographs of this, and there was a controversy around it, whether the family or Einstein had approved this act, but there was a belief that this has to happen for the sake of humanity. There are a few medical observational things about the brain, but the stories that you hear or the images that you see, they are not true. It was not that irregular. There were some small irregularities, but not that irregular. But what I want to say here is that this brain story could have been part of the next point I want to talk about again, and it is Einstein as icon. Right. So I said in the beginning that Einstein had this quirky personality, and the media loved him. But also, how many films, novels, even games that have Einstein in them? Right. And this is part of making Einstein the icon that he is. He is in the news, he is in cinema, he is in art, and so on. And as we said, he was involved in all this. He had this big personality. And so it was easy for him to become the icon that he became. The media liked him because he was a symbol. He is a brand related to intelligence, to genius. And I discussed this partially when we were talking about Picasso, right? So why does the media talk about Picasso? Because everyone knows about Picasso. But why does everyone know about Picasso? Because the media talks about Picasso and on. And it seems that this thing applies to Einstein as well, in a sense. The icon, the involvement, it leads to more of this same status, which eventually could explain why the image is so prevalent and so powerful, even though, as I said, at this level, we can't say that this scientist is smarter than that scientist or something like that. Finally, what can we learn? How can we reflect on this story of Einstein? There are very interesting lessons. One, work, passion, and the power of curiosity and playfulness in work, and how it can lead to the creation of great work that we always talk about. The power of imagination and creativity, and how we can add that, how we can use that in work. The order between imagination and analysis, visualizing and writing or equations, and has to be in that order. And finally, the beauty of diversity, the beauty of looking at the big picture and trying to reimagine the worlds and the laws that govern it.